Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I, through you, thank the Speaker for the selection of this adjournment debate this evening. Madam Deputy Speaker, today is the 11th of March, and on the 11th of March since 2004, in those dreadful bombings in Madrid, there has been the European Victims' Day, Victims of Terror Day. And this occasion gives us the opportunity to reflect on terror, on the innocent victims of terror. As a House, it gives us the opportunity to reflect on the impact such acts of terror have had on this institution, on this House of Commons. When I was elected here in 2015, I entered Parliament alongside Jo Cox, who is memorialised to my right. She was cut down by far-right extremists. I served for many a year with David Amos and had a great relationship with David, and he was struck down by Islamic terrorists. And when you look to either side of the chamber, Madam Deputy Speaker, you will note under the door 3 heraldic plaques, one to the Reverend Robert Bradford, one to Ian Gow, and one to Eri Neve. All parliamentarians serving their country cut down by Irish Republican terrorists. And little known behind your chair, Madam Deputy Speaker, there are 2 further plaques, one to Sir Anthony Berry, who was killed in the Brighton bomb by Irish Republican terrorists, and to its left, Sir Henry Wilson, who was, at the time of the First World War, a hero of this country, latterly an Irish Unionist Member of Parliament, cut down by Irish Republican terrorists. And so occasions like this give us the opportunity to reflect. But it's important for us as parliamentarians to consider what we can do in the best interests of those we represent. And legacy continues to be a sore in Northern Ireland that has not healed. The scars remain amongst communities of whatever constitutional aspiration who have been affected by the onslaught of terror that we faced. I'm privileged to sit on the Northern Ireland Affairs Committee, but much more so was privileged last week, alongside colleagues who are present in the chamber today, to meet with a number of organisations who represent the interests of innocent victims. We met with the 174 Trust, we met with the victims at Wave Trauma Centre. We met with the victims represented by SEF, South East Fermanagh and Enniskillen Victims Organisation. And the most profound thing they said to us, that within their county of Fermanagh, 42 people were killed. 40 of them by Republican terrorists, none by loyalists, because the people of Fermanagh didn't turn to taking the law into their own hands. The people of Fermanagh put their trust and faith in law and order, into the parts of our state that are there to protect us. And it's most profound because there are few other organisations, there is no other county in Northern Ireland where it is true that that can be said. But Madam Deputy Speaker, there was one recurring theme throughout the engagement that we had during the course of those 2 days. And that was that victims wanted truth and justice.
On that point, would they? Madam, can I commend my honourable friend, the Member for East Belfast, for bringing this forward to the House today. His passion for victims is long-standing and admirable. Does my right honourable friend agree that we need to set in stone the truth of victims in Northern Ireland? And for all the attention is given to the 10% of victims, the families of the 90% of victims who suffer in silence, will this day, does the right honourable member, will this day ensure that true victims' stories are told and remembered without any whitewashing whatsoever?
Gavin Robinson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I appreciate the intervention, because there is a task on the part of government with the legislation that they are considering at the moment on storytelling, on reconciliation, on the narrative that people wish to share, but that their truth is told and that their truth is known. I see the Honourable Lady for South Belfast is standing.
I thank the member for giving way. I know his time is precious, and I want to associate myself with the remarks he made about members of this House who were lost, and that it was a moving visit we had last week with victims in Belfast and Fermanagh, people who were murdered by perpetrators from various sides of the conflict, and it showed their continuing pain and their fortitude, as the opening weeks of the Omagh inquiry have done as well. And from the SDLP's part, we support a parallel and a Dublin inquiry on that. Does the member agree with me that in the current legacy discussion, a moment is coming, an opportunity where we can assert that it's the needs of victims and not those of perpetrators that have primacy, and that we can't afford to squander that opportunity? Robinson.
I'm very grateful for the intervention from the Honourable Lady, and I think she is right that we cannot squander the opportunity. But for too long now I've heard voices within government say the one thing that the parties of Northern Ireland can agree on is their opposition to the Legacy Act, but for very different reasons. And very often we don't get the opportunity to fully explore those very different reasons, and for our part, we will never stand in the way of justice, and we will always support innocent victims. Of course, give way.
But I thank my honourable friend for giving way and for securing this really important debate on such a moving subject. I too was very honoured to go with him and other members of the Northern Ireland Affairs Committee to visit Seth in Fermanagh last week, and it was profoundly moving. And I wonder if he would agree with me that as part of dealing with this legacy in relation to the Independent Commission for Reconciliation and Information Recovery, that, as he says, that truth, justice and reconciliation must be intentional parts of that body going forward.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It was interesting to hear the reflections of some who said, why do I need to reconcile? I've been blown up. I've been shot. I've lost my father, my mother, my sister, my brother. Why is the onus on me to reconcile? I should be honoured for the sacrifice that I've made or been forced to go through, but where's somebody coming along to say I'm sorry? That you did not deserve what occurred to you or to your family member, that you didn't need to live through the pain, that you don't deserve the scars that you bear. And so there's much more focus, I agree with him entirely, much more focus required on reconciliation.
Would the Honourable reply?
Of course I will.
Thanks. Much obliged. As someone who had the honour of hosting an event on this day for all the years I was a member of the Northern Ireland Assembly, I commend the Right Honourable Member for securing this debate. But does he agree with me that one of the most abiding and insidious hurts to victims of terrorism is the constant glorification of those who made them victims? And particularly when it comes to those who sit in government in Northern Ireland, by their attendance at events commemorating those who were the men of blood and who delivered death and destruction to our streets. Isn't that one of the most hateful and insidious things that can be done to a victim in the re-traumatisation that it brings?
Gavin Robinson.
Very grateful to the Honourable Member for North Antrim, and I would say to him two things on that. The first is, I'm glad he did organise for 13 years, I think, an event at Stormont to mark European Victim of Terror Day. And also that it occurred yesterday, so his legacy lives on, and I was pleased to attend it, as I have on many occasions in the past. But on his second point, he's absolutely right. And yesterday I had the opportunity to meet again. We met last week, but yesterday I met again with Margaret and Ruth Veitch, who lost loved ones in the Enniskillen bomb. And I reflected to them, but resonates so much with this point, about the glorification of terror, particularly from those who have a responsibility to live by Nolan principles and have a responsibility to fulfil the political offices that they hold, and yet they attend commemorations and they glorify those who revelled in terror. And the excuse they always use is that we have a right to remember our dead. That's what they say. They say they have a right to remember their dead. But yet Margaret and Ruth lost family members by simply turning up to remember the war dead on Remembrance Sunday in Enniskillen. So for them to hear their political leaders say, we do this because we have an entitlement to remember our war dead. Margaret and Ruth and their parents were offered no opportunity to remember rightfully those who sacrificed for freedom in our country. I see the Right Honourable Member.
Well, I'm very grateful to the Right Honourable Member, and when he talks of truth and justice, he will be aware that the Northern Ireland Sentences Act means that if prosecutions carry on, no one will serve more than 2 years actually in jail. And if prosecutions carry on, they will do everything they can to cover up the truth in defending themselves. So when people criticise the Legacy Act, which did propose a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, aren't they really criticising a measure which would have given a much better opportunity for the truth to come out once the threat of prosecutions was removed, given that the punishment wouldn't fit the crime, even if someone were found guilty?
Gavin Robinson.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the Right Honourable Gentleman knows that I have high regard for him, and we explored these issues at great length when he chaired the Defence Select Committee and I was but a lowly member of it. The truth is there are hundreds, if not thousands, of individuals in Northern Ireland who have been prosecuted already. How often do you see them go to meet their victims or the families of their victims? How often do you see them trying to apply a balm on the wound that has never healed? And those are individuals who have received justice. So when I started on this before the explosion of interventions about truth and justice, it's important for this debate, because for the last number of years the terminology from this chamber has been very clearly, you're not going to get justice, but we can offer you truth. And the only way you can get truth is if we deny justice. And that's what the Legacy Act presented the people of Northern Ireland. That's why we opposed it. They want justice. They want the day in court. We've had to suffer versions of justice in Northern Ireland for decades now. We didn't support the Belfast Agreement because of the release of prisoners. We don't support the notion that those who take life could be sentenced for 2 years, sentenced for much longer, but only have to serve 2 years. Nor did we support on-the-runs letters. Nor did we support amnesties for terrorists throughout the Labour government proposals or the Conservative government proposals, because the approach that denies justice is one that will never allow the wounds to heal. Madam Deputy Speaker, I want to reflect on a number of institutions that we have that are supposed to aid justice and truth and reconciliation in Northern Ireland. One of them is the Police Ombudsman's Office in Northern Ireland. The Police Ombudsman's Office was established to allow members of the community that didn't support the police to buy into the police, to get confidence within the police. But yet I'm sorry to say in this debate today that we have a police ombudsman for whom I have no confidence. None whatsoever. A police ombudsman that constructed the notion of collusion was struck down by the courts, so she constructed the notion of collusive behaviours. She was struck down by the courts. More recently, she's been missing in action, Madam Deputy Speaker. She's fit to do the job. She's unfit to do the job. She's being investigated by the West Midlands Police herself. And yet, whether she's obstructing in her role or not, I'll raise one family, one gentleman, Alan Black. Alan Black was a workman who was out to work with his colleagues. All of them, bar one, were Protestants. And in 1976 in Kingsmill, all bar one were attacked by the IRA. When asked to identify themselves, the one individual who identified himself as a Catholic was allowed to leave. 11 of Alan's colleagues were murdered that day for no other reason than that they had a Protestant faith, and Alan survived. He went to the police ombudsman looking for answers in the investigation 14 years ago. He had an inquest that concluded 11 months ago. And what do we hear from the Ombudsman's office? They are ready to report, but 11 months later, there has still been no outcome, no publication, and no report for Alan. Alan is an old man now. He is an ill man because of the attack. He has suffered greatly, and yet he put his faith in the organisations that were set up to instil confidence for him and for members of our community, and he has received nothing. The Omagh inquiry, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Omagh inquiry started 5 weeks ago. The first 4 weeks were testimonies from those families who lost so tragically that day. 4 months after the Belfast Agreement was signed, 4 months after society was meant to bask in peace, and yet 29 people and 2 unborn babies were killed that day in Omagh. Now, the inquiry has a cross-border dimension. When the courts in Belfast said in 2021 that there should be an inquiry in Omagh, they also said there needed to be one in the Republic of Ireland, because the bomb was constructed in the Republic of Ireland, the bomb was planted by a provisional IRA bomb team who were operating from the Republic of Ireland, travelled from the Republic of Ireland and escaped to the Republic of Ireland. And so when the courts in Belfast said there needed to be a Republic of Ireland inquiry, and the Honourable Lady for Belfast South indicated her support for such an inquiry in the South, it's for this reason. There are answers that are required. And what do we have so far? Reluctance on the part of the Irish government. There's nothing new in that. The Irish government have singularly failed to do anything on legacy apart from criticise the British government for the last 30 years. During the Troubles, they allowed people to hide in the Irish Republic. They armed people in the Irish Republic. They wouldn't extradite terrorists from the Irish Republic. And yet today, they stand and look full square in the eye. The families of the 29 victims of Omagh and say, I'm sorry, we're not going to do that for you. We're not going to give you answers. The same bomb team responsible for Omagh were responsible for 20 bombings in 1997 and 1998, whether it was Banbridge, Portadown, Lisburn, Uri, Moira, right throughout Northern Ireland. They were making their mark, and they were making their voice heard in the run-up to peace negotiations. It's an outrage, Madam Deputy Speaker, and that the Irish government still stand back and say they won't provide an inquiry is a disgrace. They have offered honeyed words for years, and yet they do nothing to aid the sorrow because they won't provide the conditions that allow us to challenge Garda Dermot Jennings, who is accused of having said, we'll let one more through, lads, because he knew the bombing team. Who's going to challenge and question the J2 Irish intelligence officials? Who's going to ask them the questions? Our inquiry can't do it because they don't have the powers. And I know the government are considering a memorandum of understanding with the Irish government, and that is important. But if it doesn't allow for the production of people as well as papers, it will never work. It's why there has to be an inquiry in the Republic of Ireland too, and I'm glad there's cross-support for that. The Committee on the Administration of Justice Northern Ireland that, Madam Deputy Speaker, I struggle with, published a brilliant report in the last 4 weeks castigating the Irish Republic for their total failure to do anything on legacy over the last 30 years. They have no legacy bodies. They have no legacy investigations unit. They have no historical inquiries team. They have no ombudsman service. They have no infrastructure whatsoever to answer questions on legacy, and no infrastructure whatsoever to aid the healing of the past. Now, very quickly.
Gregor Campbell.
I thank the Honourable Member for giving way. Just on that issue, what concerns many people in Northern Ireland is that when things happen in Northern Ireland that are of a particular disposition, it can be quite often the case that the Republic of Ireland's government weigh in quite heavily to press our government to do certain things. But it seems on many occasions when there are things happening which our government should be making representations to the Republic's government, that they fail to adequately do so.
He's absolutely right, Madam Deputy Speaker. There was a summit last week, and not one word of these issues emerged from it. Save this, the Irish government saying that they're not quite ready yet to withdraw their challenge against the British government for the Legacy Act. They reeled against an amnesty being provided just as we did. But they decided to challenge their near neighbours in the British government through the European courts. They decided to do that without trying to address these issues, and yet when the onus is on them, when the shoe is on the other foot, they offer nothing. The Northern Ireland Assembly just this evening, Madam Deputy Speaker, passed a motion to say that the Irish government should hold an inquiry into Omagh. I agree. It was amended by the DUP and it was unanimously supported by every party in Stormont. That's a message I hope that the Minister will take to the Irish Government about the strength of feeling on this issue. We looked a lot of victims in the eye last week, but we can't continue for year after year to look victims in the eyes and say nice things, but offer no hope, offer no truth, and offer no justice. I'm afraid I've run out of time. Hello.
It's just briefly on that debate that has happened in the Assembly, brought by the Ulster Unionist Party, amended by the DUP. So often we hear in this place, when all parties stand together in the Northern Ireland Assembly, that the government will react. Will they join with me in asking the Minister to respond to that debate?
Robinson, there are 9 minutes remaining.
Yes, thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm very grateful I took that because it was a powerful point and I'm grateful for your latitude. Minister, I'm delighted you're here this evening. I hope you respond positively. I hope you recognise the pain and the anguish, as you know you've met individuals yourself in Northern Ireland. There's a long way to go on providing the answers, the truth and the justice. We won't be found wanting, and I hope the Labour Government won't either.